The timeless question of humanity, why there is something instead of nothing, has become one of the deepest contemplations of human consciousness since the very moment we began to be aware of ourselves. It is not simply a philosophical puzzle to debate, but a calling from the depths of the heart, where human beings confront the infinite vastness of the universe and suddenly realize their own smallness. Each time we gaze at the starry sky, listen to the sound of the ocean waves, or feel the rhythm of our own breath, the question arises like a mysterious echo, compelling us to wonder where this existence comes from and what its true meaning might be. From the perspective of Buddhism, the arising of this question is not meant to lead to a rigid answer or a final concept to satisfy the intellect, but rather it is an invitation for the mind to open, for us to step into the awakening. Before the sacredness of existence, the Buddha taught that with quiet contemplation, we will see that our very presence here, in this very moment, is already a miracle beyond words. The existence of body and mind right now is evidence of life unfolding. And this in itself is the most profound response to what seems to be an unanswerable question. When we let go of the restless urge to chase after abstract truths and instead return to direct experience, we begin to realize that the miracle is not somewhere far away. It is manifesting in each breath, each heartbeat, each ray of sunlight touching the leaves, and even within moments of sorrow, life still silently reveals itself and invites us to return and see its true nature. In that realization, we understand that the question of why there is something instead of nothing does not require a definitive answer, because this wondrous existence itself is a message more eloquent than any explanation. With the wisdom of Buddhism, we no longer need to prove existence through theories, for truth always reveals itself in the present moment. What is needed is only the awakening to recognize it and to live fully within it. Once we see that existence itself is the greatest miracle, we will no longer be lost in endless searching. Instead, there will arise a deep serenity, where the heart blends with the vast universe, where every question no longer burdens us, but becomes a doorway opening to boundless life and an infinite gratitude for every moment of being. This question has stirred the minds of countless people, from mystics dwelling in the mountains to great philosophers, and even modern physicists tirelessly exploring the nature of the universe. This shows the philosophical weight and spiritual depth it carries. It transcends all boundaries of time, culture, and doctrine, becoming a red thread connecting wisdom and science. From sacred scriptures to cutting-edge research, everyone in some way encounters this question, for it awakens in human consciousness a longing about the meaning of existence and the origin of all things. In the light of the Dharma, this question is not meant to drag us into endless debates. It arises to awaken the capacity for contemplation and insight. When we face it, we are compelled to pause and look deeply into the nature of reality. The mystics of old often used this question as a doorway into meditation. Practitioners, through it, no longer chased after intellectual reasoning, but returned to the stillness of the mind. Modern physicists, no matter how advanced their instruments may be, still encounter a mystery beyond all formulas. Thus, this question becomes a bridge between science and spirituality. It connects reason and intuition, the thirst for knowledge and the reverence before the unknowable. What is precious is that in every approach, this question opens a new path for humanity. It makes us realize that perhaps true value does not lie in finding a final answer. Instead, it lies in the journey of reflection and listening. In that process, the mind is expanded, and wisdom and humility are cultivated. Gradually, we come to see that the existence of the universe and of ourselves is a miracle that no theory can contain and only awakening can directly touch.
In the history of Western thought, many philosophers and scholars have attempted to answer this question. Leibniz believed that the existence of all things must come from an all-powerful creator, from whom everything arises. Aristotle spoke of the concept of the first cause uncaused, a reality that exists by itself, not created by anything else, yet the origin of all things. In modern times, as science advanced, the Big Bang theory was proposed to explain the birth of the universe. Yet, even that theory cannot silence the lingering question, for another inquiry soon arises. What was before? What brought about the very first explosion? These efforts reveal the deep human longing to seek the root of existence. Whether approached through theology, philosophy, or science, the question never ceases to knock at our consciousness. Each theory offers an explanation, yet all eventually lead us to a threshold where reason must pause. And it is precisely at that threshold that another dimension opens, the depth of inner contemplation, where the answer is no longer found in concepts or formulas, but in awakening to the truth that existence itself is already a mystery beyond measure.
Parmenides once argued that pure nothingness is impossible to think of. For the very moment we attempt to imagine nothing, the mind immediately turns it into a form of something. His reasoning is not merely a philosophical assertion, but also a mirror reflecting the limits of human thought. We often believe that reason can grasp everything. Yet when facing the idea of nothingness, reason becomes powerless. And it is precisely in this powerlessness that a deeper doorway opens, showing us that existence cannot be explained by concepts alone, but must be directly lived and experienced. From the Buddhist perspective, Parmenides' insight can be understood as a reminder that even the concept of nothingness is itself a product of the mind. When we think of nothing, an image or notion arises in consciousness, and in that very arising, it has already become something. What is called absolute nothingness cannot be captured by thought, for thought always requires an object to grasp. It is like when we close our eyes and believe we are falling into complete darkness. Yet we are still aware of the darkness, and that very awareness has transformed nothing into a form of presence. Buddhism teaches that rather than being bound by dualistic notions such as being and non-being, existence and nothingness, we must look deeper to see that all things are inseparable from one another. As long as the mind insists on drawing sharp distinctions between being and non-being, it will remain trapped in endless debate. But when we let go of such dualistic ideas, we realize that existence is not found at either extreme, but is the living flow manifesting in every moment. Parmenides may not have spoken in the language of the Dharma, yet his reasoning points to the truth that the nature of existence transcends the grasp of ordinary thought. Just as the Buddha taught that we should not cling to the concepts of permanence or annihilation. Reality is neither a fixed entity nor absolute nothingness. Reality is the wondrous presence unfolding through countless forms. To touch it, we need a calm and open mind, rather than mere logical analysis. Through such contemplation, we realize that the very question of nothingness itself serves as a doorway. It leads us beyond the limits of reasoning and back to the direct experience of life. In that moment, we see clearly that the simple act of breathing and being present here is already the strongest proof that absolute nothingness has no ground. And instead of searching for a final definition, we can smile, listen to the beating of the heart, and recognize that life itself is the answer.
This is not merely an abstract issue reserved for philosophers or thinkers. It is a very real longing that appears in daily life. When we go through loss, when we are separated from loved ones, or in long moments of loneliness, the question returns with deep emotional weight. It is no longer intellectual curiosity, but the yearning of the heart, wondering why we exist, why life appears amid such fragility and change. In such moments, the question of existence becomes an echo from the innermost depths of the soul, touching emotional layers that dry reasoning can never reach. Buddhism teaches that it is precisely in moments of suffering that the question of existence truly arises with power. For when all familiar attachments fall away, the mind begins to glimpse the emptiness of impermanence. And from that emptiness arises the yearning to discover a deeper meaning for life. This is not an escape from pain, but an awakening. Loss reveals that everything we hold on to is fragile, yet at the same time it shows us the value of each moment we are alive. When a person sits in solitude and wonders about their existence, it is a sign that the mind is beginning its journey back to the source. In the Dharma, such contemplation is not considered useless, but a precious opportunity to touch the truth. The question, why is there something instead of nothing, is not only to be answered, but to guide us back to the present moment, where each breath, each bird's song, and each ray of sunlight
becomes a living testimony to the miracle of existence. Thus, this question is both philosophical and emotional. It not only awakens profound reflection, but also opens the door for us to learn how to love and cherish life. For when we see that existence itself is not something to be taken for granted, our hearts naturally soften, compassion deepens, and gratitude blossoms for every moment we are alive.
While many philosophies and religions have sought to explain the origin of the universe, Buddhism takes a different approach. The Buddha did not devote much time to discussing the beginning of the cosmos or searching for the first cause of existence. He taught that such questions, however fascinating, do not lead to liberation from suffering. Instead, Buddhism turns our attention to the present, to the reality of human life. Rather than endlessly chasing the question, why does existence arise? The Buddha urged us to recognize the suffering that is already here and to explore the path that leads to its cessation. In the Samyutta Agama, the Buddha gave the example of a man struck by a poisoned arrow. Instead of wasting time asking who shot the arrow, where he came from, or what material the arrow was made of, the urgent task is to remove it and save his life. In the same way, rather than obsessing over the origins of the universe, Buddhism points us toward what is more immediate and vital: how to overcome suffering in this very life. This is the essence of the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha's core teaching. Suffering, its cause, its cessation, and the path. This path is not abstract theory, but a living practice we can apply moment by moment. When we focus on the present, we begin to see the nature of life clearly. Suffering is not only caused by external conditions, but arises from craving, aversion, and ignorance within. Seeing this, we start to untie the knots in our own hearts. As greed, hatred, and delusion are transformed, peace naturally arises. The Buddha did not answer the question of why existence is, but he gave us a way to live fully with existence, to transform suffering into joy. In the light of the Dharma, setting aside metaphysical speculation is not a denial, but the wisdom of one who sees the limits of reason. For no matter how many theories about the universe we produce, human suffering remains unless it is directly addressed. Buddhism emphasizes that practice in the present is the real answer. When we breathe mindfully, cultivate compassion, and live simply and consciously, we are walking on the path of liberation. And in each step, we touch the profound meaning of existence, not through concepts, but through the living experience of our own being. In the scriptures, the Buddha offered a vivid example to illustrate the futility of chasing after metaphysical questions. He told of a man struck by a poisoned arrow. Instead of allowing the healer to remove the arrow and save his life, the man insisted on knowing who shot it, where he came from, what family he belonged to, what the bow was made of, and how the arrow was crafted. While these questions remained unanswered, the poison spread through his body, and he died in vain. This parable shows how being absorbed in unnecessary details can cause us to neglect what is urgent and essential. The Buddha reminded us that human beings often fall into the same trap when we pose endless questions about the universe and its origin. Even if we discovered who shot the arrow or the nature of the bow and arrow, suffering would still persist here and now. What truly matters is not how the cosmos began, but how we can free ourselves from suffering in this very life. If we drown in the pursuit of abstract knowledge while ignoring our present pain, we are like the man poisoned by the arrow, slowly destroyed by greed, hatred, and delusion. Through the parable of the poisoned arrow, the Buddha emphasized that his path is not a system of metaphysical theories, but a practical way of living. Rather than pouring energy into searching for some distant first cause, he directed us to the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path, the living practice that allows us to remove the poisoned arrow of suffering from our hearts. Only when that arrow is removed can body and mind find peace, and we can truly touch the freedom and serenity of liberation.
One of the core insights the Buddha revealed to humanity is the teaching of dependent origination, paticca samuppada. He taught that nothing in the universe exists independently. Everything arises and passes away through conditions. A flower cannot exist without the soil, water, sunlight, clouds, and countless other factors. In the same way, we ourselves are not separate beings, but the result of the combination of body, mind, environment, society, and countless conditions stretching back into the past. Looking deeply, we see that no entity can exist on its own. All are links in the vast web of life. Dependent origination is not just a philosophical idea, but a key to understanding the roots of suffering. The Buddha explained that suffering does not appear by chance. It arises from specific conditions: craving, ignorance, and attachment. When these conditions are present, suffering is present. When they are transformed and released, suffering ceases. Just as fire needs fuel to burn, when the fuel is gone, the flame naturally goes out. Realizing this, we gain the power of liberation, for we see that suffering is not destiny, but the result of conditions that can be changed. Seeing dependent origination also nurtures deep compassion. By understanding that our life is intimately connected with the life of all beings, we begin to value and protect every condition that sustains existence. The breath we take in depends on trees. The food on our table is the fruit of earth, sky, and countless human efforts. This body, this mind, and every experience we have are sustained by innumerable causes and conditions. This truth dissolves pride and the illusion of a separate self, replacing them with gratitude and humility before the wondrous net of interbeing. Dependent origination also reveals the impermanent nature of all things. Since everything exists only through conditions, it is constantly changing as conditions change. Nothing is permanent, nothing lasts forever. This truth may unsettle us at first, but it is also the doorway to freedom. For it is precisely because nothing is fixed that transformation is possible. We can plant wholesome conditions to create peace in the present and a brighter future. Thus, the wisdom of dependent origination not only explains how the universe operates, but also shows us how to live mindfully, compassionately, and with gratitude. Instead of seeing existence as an unsolvable riddle, Buddhism invites us to directly touch the truth that everything is interconnected and interdependent. In that awareness, we find true freedom. Foreseeing dependent origination frees us from the illusion of a separate self and allows us to flow in harmony with the boundless stream of life.
In the Buddhist view of the cosmos, rather than seeking an absolute beginning of the universe, the Buddha taught that samsara, the cycle of rebirth, cannot be traced to a first point. No matter how far back we search, the question of an original beginning always leads us into an endless loop. For this reason, he did not encourage speculation about a distant origin, but invited us to look directly into the life unfolding here and now. It is here that we can clearly see the conditions sustaining our existence, and it is here that we have the power to practice transformation. Samsara, according to the Buddha, is the endless cycle of birth, aging, sickness, and death, where beings remain bound by ignorance and craving. Yet the crucial matter is not when we entered this cycle, but what is sustaining it now. Like a flame, there is no need to ask where the very first fire began. What matters is that it continues to burn because there is fuel. Likewise, life continues because conditions such as craving, karma, and ignorance are still present. When those conditions are recognized and transformed, the wheel of samsara comes to a stop. What is unique in the Buddhist cosmology is its practical orientation. The Buddha did not create a system of metaphysics to satisfy curiosity, but a path of practice. His concern was not how we explain the universe, but how we live in it. By observing the conditions sustaining our existence now, we learn to nurture wholesome causes and to release those that bring suffering. This is the concrete path that gradually leads us beyond the cycle of rebirth. Samsara, therefore, is not some distant notion, but the reality of our everyday lives. It manifests in habits, in repetitive patterns of thought and behavior that keep us circling in suffering. Yet precisely here lies the opportunity for freedom. With a single mindful breath, a choice of compassion over anger, an act of letting go instead of clinging, we begin to weaken the fuel of samsara. Gradually, its power diminishes, and the path of liberation opens before us. Karma is one of the central teachings of Buddhism, helping us understand why each person's existence carries different conditions and qualities. The Buddha taught that our lives are not governed by a predetermined fate, nor imposed by some external divine power, but are shaped by intentional actions, past and present. Every thought, word, and deed plants a seed in our consciousness. When conditions are ripe, these seeds bear fruit, manifesting as circumstances, character, emotions, and experiences. Karma, therefore, is not a system of punishment or reward from outside, but a natural law that reflects the intimate link between action and result. With this understanding, we free ourselves from the fear of a fixed destiny. Buddhism never views karma as an unchangeable life sentence. On the contrary, the teaching of karma opens up profound confidence that human beings have the capacity to shape their present and future. Through wholesome actions and mindful choices, we can plant seeds of peace and transform unwholesome karma already accumulated. Like a farmer caring for his field, we can cultivate seeds of compassion, wisdom, and letting go, so that in time we may harvest sweet fruits. Karma also teaches us responsibility for our own lives.
Instead of blaming circumstances or others, we look deeply and see that we ourselves are creating the conditions for our existence. Every harsh word may become unwholesome karma, sowing the seeds of suffering. But every loving and understanding word may become wholesome karma, opening the way to peace. The choices we make in each moment determine the quality of our lives, both now and in the future. Most importantly, the teaching of karma closes the door on no one. Anyone, in any situation, can renew themselves through mindfulness. A moment of awareness, a small act of kindness, a single letting go of anger, all of these can change the flow of karma. When we realize that we are always the active agent, we cultivate faith and inner strength. From there, we learn to live responsibly, to choose the wholesome path, and to create a meaningful life not only for ourselves, but for all beings around us.
The middle way is one of the essential jewels of the Buddha's teaching, discovered after many years of searching for truth amid extremes. Before awakening, the Buddha lived in luxury within the palace and later practiced harsh austerities, tormenting his body to the brink of death. In the end, he realized that neither indulgence nor self-mortification leads to liberation. From direct experience, he revealed that truth is not found in any extreme, but in the middle way, the path that avoids both sensual indulgence and ascetic denial. This is not only a way of living, but also a profound principle for seeing the nature of reality. In his teaching, the Buddha emphasized that we must rise above two extreme views: eternalism, the belief in a permanent, unchanging essence, and nihilism, the denial of existence, the belief that death is the absolute end. Neither view reflects reality, for both arise from dualistic thinking and clinging. The middle way is the path of insight into dependent origination. Everything exists due to conditions, and when conditions change, things also change. Thus, nothing is eternal, yet nothing falls into absolute nothingness. With the middle way, we are no longer bound by extreme perspectives. Instead of clinging to the idea of a permanent beginning, we see that both the cosmos and ourselves are always transforming through conditions. Instead of fearing nihilism, we see that life continues unceasingly through countless forms, like a flame passed from one torch to another. The middle way helps us release heavy attachments and live more peacefully in the midst of change. The middle way is also embodied in the Noble Eightfold Path the Buddha taught: right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. These are not distant theories, but practical guidelines for living with balance, awareness, and compassion. Walking this path, we avoid destructive extremes and misguided notions, step by step, touching the deep truth of dependent origination and impermanence. In this way, we discover freedom and serenity in the present moment, instead of being trapped in endless philosophical disputes. Shunyata, or emptiness, is one of the most profound teachings of Mahayana Buddhism, and often one of the most misunderstood. When people hear the word emptiness, many assume that the Buddha taught that nothing exists, that everything is void. But the truth is entirely different. The Buddha did not deny the presence of the world. Rather, he pointed out
that all things lack an independent self-nature. Everything exists, but its existence is always dependent upon countless causes and conditions. Nothing can exist on its own. To understand this, we can reflect on the image of waves and the ocean. A wave cannot exist apart from the sea. A wave is nothing other than water, a temporary expression of the ocean in motion. When the wave calms, we call it water. When the water rises, we call it a wave. Yet the wave has never been separate from the ocean, and the ocean has never been absent from the wave. In the same way, every phenomenon in life has no independent essence. All are expressions in the endless flow of dependent origination. Emptiness, therefore, is not a cold abyss of nihilism, but a doorway into liberating wisdom. When we see that all things lack fixed self-nature, we are freed from clinging. Craving and aversion are rooted in the illusion of a real self, a permanent mine. But when we realize that what we call self is only a collection of body, mind, and countless conditions, we begin to let go. This letting go is not a loss, but a profound freedom, opening the capacity to live fully in each moment. In the light of emptiness, we also cultivate boundless compassion. For if nothing exists independently, then everything is intimately interconnected. The suffering of others is not separate from us, and our joy is intertwined with the happiness of all beings. Seeing this truth, we no longer live only for ourselves, but embrace and protect life in all its forms. Emptiness becomes the foundation of both wisdom and love, helping us move beyond the illusion of a separate self and merge with the great ocean of life. Thus, when the Buddha taught about emptiness, he did not lead us to nihilism, but opened the way to see the truth, that all things are wondrous in their lack of fixed identity, in their interbeing, and in their impermanence. Understanding shunyata, we are no longer afraid of change, for we see that within every transformation is the presence of unending life, just as the wave and the ocean have never been apart. And through this vision, we find peace, freedom, and boundless gratitude for every present moment.
Nagarjuna, the great philosopher of Mahayana Buddhism, developed the teaching of emptiness into a profound philosophical system that continues to inspire generations. He taught, "That which is dependently arisen is empty, and because it is empty, it can function." This statement carries wondrous wisdom. If all phenomena arise through dependent origination, meaning they have no independent essence, then their nature is emptiness. But emptiness here does not mean non-existence. It means the absence of a fixed self-nature. Precisely because of this absence, things are able to exist, change, and function. Consider a seed. A seed cannot become a tree on its own. It requires soil, water, sunlight, climate, and care. When the conditions are sufficient, The seed sprouts, grows, and bears fruit. At each stage, its form changes constantly, yet the flow of life never ceases. If the seed had a permanent essence, it could never sprout or become a tree. It is precisely because of its emptiness, its lack of inherent, unchanging identity, that it can transform into countless forms. Nagarjuna's philosophy helps us move beyond the misunderstanding of emptiness as mere nothingness. Reality is not a cold void, but a dynamic, wondrous flow. When we understand that all things are empty, we no longer cling to forms or concepts, but neither do we deny their vivid presence. A flower is empty, for it has no separate self-nature. Yet the flower exists, blooms, and brings beauty to the world. Emptiness is the condition for form, and form is the manifestation of emptiness. From this view, we see that emptiness is never apart from life. It is not an abstract idea, but the reality operating in each breath and moment. We exist not as independent selves, but as the convergence of countless conditions: parents, ancestors, air, food, sunlight, love, and past experiences. Seeing this, we let go of the illusion of a separate I, opening ourselves to the boundless stream of life. And in this letting go, we touch true freedom.
When the Buddha taught emptiness, he did not merely open a door to wisdom, but also laid the foundation for true compassion. Emptiness shows us that nothing exists independently. All things arise in dependence upon one another. This body is not only ours, but the result of countless conditions: parents, ancestors, earth, water, wind, sunlight, plants, and innumerable other factors. Looking deeply, we see that the self is not a separate entity, but a continuous flow of interconnections. This realization dissolves the illusion of an isolated self. When we no longer believe we are separate, our hearts naturally open to others. Their pain is no longer distant, but becomes part of our own. Our happiness cannot be apart from the happiness of all. Like waves and the ocean that cannot be divided, we and all beings cannot be separated. Seeing this truth, compassion arises effortlessly, without force or pretense. In daily life, practicing insight into emptiness can transform the way we respond. When someone hurts us, instead of seeing only the I that is wounded, we can also see the circumstances, suffering, and conditions that led them to act that way. This vision gives rise to understanding, helping us respond not with hatred, but with care. Compassion then ceases to be an abstract ideal and becomes our breath, our smile, and the way we treat ourselves and others. Emptiness, therefore, is not cold or bleak, as some may fear. On the contrary, it is the fertile ground where love and empathy grow. For when we no longer cling to a narrow self, we are free to live for others, to care for the world as our very body. And in this caring, we too are nourished and healed. Thus, emptiness becomes the bridge between wisdom and compassion. Wisdom shows us that there is no independent self, and from that vision, the heart naturally expands. When wisdom and compassion unite, we walk the path of liberation not only for ourselves, but for all beings.
When the Buddha taught emptiness, He did not merely open a door to wisdom, but also laid the foundation for true compassion. Emptiness shows us that nothing exists independently. All things arise in dependence upon one another. This body is not only ours, but the result of countless conditions: parents, ancestors, earth, water, wind, sunlight, plants, and innumerable other factors. Looking deeply, we see that the self is not a separate entity, but a continuous flow of interconnections. This realization dissolves the illusion of an isolated self. When we no longer believe we are separate, our hearts naturally open to others. Their pain is no longer distant, but becomes part of our own. Our happiness cannot be apart from the happiness of all. Like waves and the ocean that cannot be divided, we and all beings cannot be separated. Seeing this truth, compassion arises effortlessly, without force or pretense. In daily life, practicing insight into emptiness can transform the way we respond. When someone hurts us, instead of seeing only the I that is wounded, we can also see the circumstances, suffering, and conditions that led them to act that way. This vision gives rise to understanding, helping us respond not with hatred, but with care. Compassion then ceases to be an abstract ideal and becomes our breath, our smile, and the way we treat ourselves and others. Emptiness, therefore, is not cold or bleak as some may fear. On the contrary, it is the fertile ground where love and empathy grow. For when we no longer cling to a narrow self, we are free to live for others, to care for the world as our very body. And in this caring, we too are nourished and healed. Thus, emptiness becomes the bridge between wisdom and compassion. Wisdom shows us that there is no independent self, and from that vision, the heart naturally expands. When wisdom and compassion unite, we walk the path of liberation not only for ourselves, but for all beings. This is the spirit of the Bodhisattva path, using insight to shatter illusion and compassion to embrace the whole of life. Modern science, especially quantum physics, echoes what the Buddha realized thousands of years ago. As scientists probe deeper into the nature of matter, they discover that what we call the vacuum is not an empty, silent void, but is full of activity and potential. In this apparent emptiness, subatomic particles constantly arise and vanish, creating a vibrant field of energy. This empty fullness becomes the very ground of all physical phenomena. This insight reminds us of the Buddhist teaching on emptiness. Emptiness does not mean non-existence, but the absence of independent self-nature. All phenomena exist through conditions and interrelations. Quantum physics, in its exploration of energy and particles, presents a perspective remarkably close to this spirit. At the microscopic level, no solid, independent object is found. Instead, we see dynamic fields, ceaseless interactions, and relationships.
Just as Buddhism says that a flower exists thanks to the earth, water, sunlight, air, and countless conditions, quantum physics shows that even a subatomic particle exists only in relation to the entire energy field of the cosmos. Nothing is isolated. Nothing exists in absolute independence. Both science and Buddhism, though arising from different paths, converge at the point that reality is an interdependent network, ever in motion and open. Modern science also reveals the wonder of openness as the foundation of reality. Because phenomena are not fixed, creativity and transformation are possible. Reality is renewed in every moment, and this very lack of permanence makes growth, evolution, and discovery possible. From this perspective, emptiness is not merely a philosophical idea, but the very condition that allows life to flourish infinitely. The meeting of Buddhism and modern science gives us a harmonious vision. Buddhism offers inner contemplation, while science provides external verification. Both affirm that reality is not a rigid block, but a dynamic, living flow full of potential. Understanding this, we cultivate wisdom, awaken reverence for the universe, and also recognize our responsibility to live in harmony with this boundless stream of life. The Buddhist answer to the timeless question of existence is both simple and profound. The Buddha taught that all phenomena exist not because of a single first cause, but because of the coming together of many conditions. A flower blooms thanks to the soil, water, sunlight, rain, air, and countless other factors. Without any one of these, the flower could not be. The universe, in the same way, does not need an absolute beginning, but arises and functions through the ceaseless interaction of innumerable conditions. In the teaching of dependent origination, the Buddha affirmed that all things arise in dependence upon one another. Nothing exists in isolation, nor is there a supreme creator who determines everything. Reality is a constant flow of changing conditions, like a river that cannot be traced back to a first drop of water. This perspective does not deny the wonder of existence, but emphasizes that its beauty lies precisely in impermanence, interdependence, and selflessness. As long as we cling to the idea of a supreme first cause, we remain trapped in endless searching, chasing after an ultimate beginning. But Buddhism points us back to the truth right before our eyes. Everything exists because of everything else. The universe functions not like a machine with a starting point, but like a living cycle, where every phenomenon is both the result of and the condition for others. This vision brings great serenity. Instead of worrying about where the universe began, we learn to touch the conditions sustaining life here and now, realizing that every breath is the gift of trees, that every drop of water is the crystallization of earth and sky, we naturally feel gratitude and reverence for each moment. The Buddhist answer does not close the mystery of the cosmos, but opens a way of living with mindfulness, nurturing wholesome conditions and letting go of those that cause suffering. In this direct encounter with life, we discover the true meaning of existence.
In Buddhist teaching, there is a special kind of wisdom often misunderstood, the wisdom of not knowing. At first glance, one may think not knowing means ignorance or the darkness of delusion. But in fact, the Buddha pointed to a very different not knowing, the letting go of ego and the refusal to cling to the belief that we possess ultimate truth. When we honestly admit that there are things beyond our grasp, we open a vast space for stillness and for true insight to arise. The philosopher Socrates once said, "I only know that I know nothing." This was not self-deprecation, but profound humility before the mystery of reality. Buddhism, too, invites us to release the need for definitive answers to every question. The universe is vast, life endlessly changing. How could a limited mind possibly contain it all? When we know that we do not know, we become open, receptive, ready to listen and learn, meeting each moment with freshness. Not knowing in Buddhism is not blindness. On the contrary, it is the ground of true wisdom. Because we are not fixed in rigid views, we are able to look more deeply and see more clearly. Clinging to concepts often robs us of freedom and fuels conflict. But embracing uncertainty allows us to dwell peacefully within the questions, letting every experience become an opportunity for contemplation. This kind of wisdom does not seek to explain everything, but helps us live fully and freely in the flow of life. The Buddha taught that certain metaphysical questions, even if answered, would not lead to liberation. They are like waves of speculation endlessly rising, agitating the mind. Instead of chasing them, he invited us to return to the breath, to the step, to the suffering and joy present here and now. In this dwelling, wisdom reveals itself, the wisdom of a mind that releases the need for certainty and walks peacefully in impermanence and non-self. Thus, not knowing is not a weakness, but a manifestation of freedom. It frees us from disputes, from clinging to narrow views, and allows us to live with an open mind and a humble heart. In that humility, both wisdom and compassion are nourished, bringing us closer to the wondrous truth of life.
In Buddhist teaching, the Buddha often emphasized that to be born as a human being is an exceedingly rare and precious opportunity. He compared it to a blind turtle living at the bottom of the ocean, surfacing only once every 100 years, and by chance placing its head through a floating wooden ring. This image shows us that life is not something to be taken for granted. Our very presence here is the result of countless wondrous conditions, making human life an incomparable treasure. The value of human life lies not only in our ability to perceive and reflect, but also in our freedom to choose our actions. Unlike other creatures bound mostly by instinct, humans can contemplate, discern, and decide to follow a path of goodness. Every moment of life is a chance to plant seeds of compassion, understanding, and mindfulness. Each word, action, and thought has the power to shape not only our own lives, but also the lives of many others. When we recognize this rarity, we no longer waste our days on trivial pursuits or meaningless ambitions. Instead, we learn to live more fully, to love and to care for ourselves and for others. It is through acts of love that we create meaning in life. By embracing the suffering of others, sharing joy, and sowing seeds of understanding, we transform our lives into a precious gift for the world. Human life may be brief, but when lived with mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom, each day can become a shining jewel. When we realize that every moment passing will never return, we cherish it more deeply and act with greater responsibility. The rarity of human life, thus, becomes a bell of mindfulness, reminding us not to squander this existence, but to use it to cultivate peace, happiness, and liberation.
In Buddhism, the Dharma is regarded as a skillful means, not as a rigid dogma that demands blind belief. The Buddha taught that the Dharma is like a raft, used to cross the river of suffering. Once we have reached the other shore, we do not need to carry the raft on our backs and boast of it everywhere. This shows that his teachings are not fixed absolutes, but practical means to touch truth and transform suffering in our daily lives. The question of existence, why is there something instead of nothing, in the light of the Dharma, is not a problem to be solved by theory, but an invitation to live fully. The answer is not found in concepts, but in direct contact with the present moment. When we drink a cup of water mindfully, when we listen to the song of birds at dawn, when we share a genuine smile, we are already touching the wondrous answer. If we remain only at the level of theory, we fall into endless debates and get trapped in concepts. But when we see that the Dharma is a map and not the actual land, we begin to walk the living path. A map may point the way, but unless we walk, we will never arrive. In the same way, the Dharma only reveals its true value when applied in daily life, breathing mindfully, speaking with kindness, acting with integrity, planting seeds of understanding and love. This helps us realize that the meaning of the Dharma lies not in the accumulation of knowledge, but in practice and transformation. The Dharma is not a burden of dogma, but a gateway to freedom. And the question of existence does not demand a final answer, but invites us back to the present moment, to discover the miracle of life in every breath. When we live fully, each moment becomes the clearest answer, brighter than any theory. In the Mahayana tradition, the Bodhisattva ideal is seen as the pinnacle of practice. A Bodhisattva is one who seeks enlightenment not only for oneself, but also vows to use wisdom and compassion to help all beings. In this light, our existence is not a meaningless accident, but a precious opportunity for service. We exist to love, to care, to transform the vast mystery of the cosmos into concrete acts of compassion in daily life. When we gaze at the starry sky, we may feel overwhelmed by the immensity of the universe. It seems so vast, while human life appears fragile and brief. But the Bodhisattva ideal reveals that it is precisely within this fragility that we can generate lasting value. Instead of being lost in awe before the unanswered mystery, we transform that wonder into motivation to love more deeply, to care for each person, each being, and each piece of earth we share. The Bodhisattva path is not something distant. It manifests in simple acts infused with great love. A gentle word can soothe a wound. A small gesture of sharing can restore someone's trust. Living with the Bodhisattva spirit, every ordinary act, cooking a meal, planting a tree, smiling at a stranger, becomes a way to nurture compassion. Through this, our existence gains profound meaning, surpassing mere questions about the universe's origin. What is remarkable is that the Bodhisattva does not deny suffering, but embraces and transforms it into the soil for growth. Pain is no longer an obstacle, but material to expand the heart. The Bodhisattva ideal teaches us that whenever we face suffering, our own or others, we can turn it into the energy of compassion. And as this compassion spreads, it becomes the most vivid answer to the question of why we exist. Thus, existence is not merely to ask about the mystery of the cosmos, but to become part of the answer through our lives. When we serve, when we love, when we act for the happiness of others, we transform the vast universe into a stream of concrete compassion. This is the Bodhisattva path, the way of turning mystery into action, wisdom into love, and life itself into a song of meaning and care.
At the end of the journey of contemplation, we realize that the mystery of existence is no longer a haunting burden on the mind, but has become a sacred music resonating in every moment of life. Instead of struggling to find a final answer, we begin to sense that the very mystery itself is the greatest gift the universe has to offer. Every breath, every smile, every step on the earth becomes wondrous, for within them we hear the melody of life unfolding. The mystery of existence is no longer a void for reason to fill, but an open space for the heart to expand, to listen, and to love. The question, why is there something instead of nothing, does not conclude with a definition, but transforms into a living experience in each present moment. When we drink a cup of water mindfully, we are drinking the whole cosmos. When we look at a flower, we are seeing the rain, the sunshine, the wind, the earth, and countless other conditions. And when we smile at a friend, we are hearing the resonance of the universe in the connection of two souls. Thus, instead of being trapped by endless questioning, we learn to dwell peacefully in the miracle unfolding before us. The mystery does not need to be erased, but to be fully lived. It is like a piece of music. We do not need to analyze every note to enjoy it, but simply listen with the whole heart. With such a mind, everything becomes a melody of the cosmos, bringing us closer to serenity, gratitude, and love. This is the very spirit the Buddha sought to transmit. Life does not need to be explained exhaustively in concepts, but to be touched with mindfulness and compassion. When we attune ourselves to the sacred music of existence, life is no longer a quest for answers, but a wondrous song, where every breath, every glance, every step resounds with meaning. And within that song, we discover peace, freedom, and boundless love.